Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another how-to video. I'm recording this on November 11th, 2015. In this chapter, we are test driving our tabs library, and in the last episode, we just added the ability to hide multiple elements. So when we start up our tabs library, what we want it to do is show one tab and hide all the others. And the way we've been sneaking up on this is by just hiding our content divs. First, we had it hide one content div, then we made it hide it by using a CSS class, and then in the last episode, we made it hide multiple content divs. Now, in this episode, we're going to continue through our TDD loop one more time, or at least one more time out of many, because with TDD, you go through that loop lots and lots of times in very small steps. So what do we want to do next? What is the next small step that we can take? What I'm thinking is that now we can start getting into the question of what's active and what's not. I think it would be useful for us to have a test that was something like, well, we've got the tabs hides an element by setting a class. It hides multiple elements. It preserves the existing classes when hiding an element. And I think we want it to say that it does not hide the active tab, content for the active tab. In fact, let's change all of these to be saying hides content. Yeah, let's say hides tabs content by setting a class on the content element. And we can say it hides multiple content elements, and it preserves existing classes when hiding a content element. And then we can take this one step further and say it does not hide the content element for the active tab. Or really, it needs to be for the whatever tab is active first, so for the default tab. Now, in order for this test to work, we're going to have to somehow tell our tabs library which tab is the default. And also, when we do this, it's going to change the way these other tests work, because these all assume that they are hiding everything. So as I sometimes do, I think what we're going to want to do in this case is actually change our existing tests. I think these two tests maybe should be combined together. And rather than saying hides multiple content elements, maybe we say something like hides all content elements except the default upon initialization. Now, if I delete this test here, are we losing anything valuable? I don't think so. I don't think we're losing anything that we don't already have here. So let's go ahead and delete this one. Delete this one and keep this one. Now, when you delete tests, it's something to do very carefully, but it's okay to delete tests. It's okay to modify existing tests if it makes your code more understandable and as long as you're not compressing too much. And this is a type of refactoring question. So it is something that you have to just sort of learn how, through your own sense of good design, figure out what the right answer is. I don't know that everybody who's in the TDD community would agree with my decisions here, but based on what I'm thinking right now, this seems like the right thing to do. Whether or not it really is, I don't know. We'll just have to try it and find out. The other thing that I'm realizing is that if we hide everything except for a default element, this one is going to want to behave differently too. Because we only have one element, it's no longer going to get hidden, so we're not going to have the new class on that element. Well, let's just see if what we have so far has broken anything. It hasn't. Okay. Let's sneak up on this. First, we're going to need to choose one of these elements to be the default element. And let's make this one the default. I chose the middle one because it's less likely to be accidentally correct than the first one. If we wrote code to hide an element, it'd be easy to just hide the first one without realizing that's all we were doing and then have our test pass. So I chose the second one because I wanted to prevent that kind of mistake. And that's something that you'll just learn as you go. So if we do this, we should say that the first element should be hidden. The second element is default, and should not be hidden. See how we use this message as a form of documentation, and element 3 should be hidden. Here I'll say default element should not be hidden. Now, what we're going to want is for this to be blank blank. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable this test for now, this second test, because once we get this working, this one will fail. So I'm just going to skip it entirely. What we've done so far shouldn't break anything. Yep, we're executing one test, we've skipped one. And now what I want to do is say that the default element should not have the hidden class on it. And in fact, it doesn't. Okay, now we need to get the default element passed into initialize and not hidden. To do that, I think what I'll do is I'll just pass it as our first element, one out of a list of many. Now, I could simply not pass the default element in, but what I'm thinking is that eventually, I'm not sure how this is going to end up working, but I'm thinking that what we want to end up passing in is a list of tabs, a list of content divs, and then the default tab or the default element. Well, let's just get this to work and then we will make it better. So we're going to take our default element. We've got our element list where we add the class name to every element. And then after we've done that, let's go ahead and remove it from the default element. And I'm hoping that will make our test pass. And it does. By the way, it did fail for the right reason before. It said default element should not be hidden, expected hide class, but instead, or we expected the blank, but instead we got the hide class. Okay, so we've gotten this partially working. Now we've got to fix up our test that we skipped. We say we want to preserve existing classes when hiding a content element. But right now, I'm thinking that's going to fail because we're not passing in the default. Yeah, it's a mess. So we'll need a default element. Let me just copy this one. And this will be our content element. Well, no, we'll just have that be element. Let's call it hidden element. And we're going to want to pass through our default element and our hidden element and our default element here. And that should result in the hidden element having existing class and new class. And it does. Good. This is starting to feel ugly again, though. But I think it's okay. Now it's time to refactor. Let's take a look at this code. This is actually pretty clean. We go through and we hide everything and then we unhide the default. That's okay. Let's go ahead and keep that for now. We do have, we could say hide all elements and then unhide element, but I think this will continue to get more complex and I don't want to refactor too prematurely. So let's go ahead and leave it as it is. Here in our test though, well, the way we're initializing, it's starting to get cumbersome and we still have the list of tabs to pass through. So I think I want to refactor this to use an options object instead of a set of parameters. I think it will read more clearly. The way an options object works in JavaScript is rather than passing in a series of parameters, you can just pass in an object. Then in that object, you use name value pairs to describe each thing that you're passing in. And so for hide class, that's really the class that we use to hide content. So I guess I'll call it content hide class. And let's put the content first and just call it content. We've got default. Yeah. So if you compare these two, you can see how I think that this is easier to read than this. It's more obvious what each thing is. Now, is it actually better? In a way, it's worse because now these things become optional. There's no documentation really about what you need to pass in except what we put here in our test. In our actual production code, it's not going to be so obvious what parameters this takes. But I think this is an improvement. Let's go ahead and refactor our other test as well. It'll take default and content and the content hide class. And of course, that's going to fail because we haven't modified our production code to use this new structure. And yeah, there it fails. But getting it to pass is actually not that hard. What we do is take an options object in our parameters here, and then each of these things becomes a variable. We're going to say var default element equals options.default, var element list equals options.content, and var class name equals options.content hide class. And I like to put them in the same order as the rest of our examples. And now if I've done this right, it should still pass. And it does. So that's how you refactor from a list of parameters to an option object. Now it's possible, and actually even potentially a good idea, to check each of these to make sure that they're defined. It's just a sanity check for programmers. So when somebody uses this, if they leave something out, they get an error. I don't usually write tests around this kind of code. This code is something I call fail fast code. And it's just like this. Say if element list is undefined, throw new error, expected options.elementList. And then the same thing for default element, or really this is content, isn't it? Content, default, and class name. There are tools like TypeScript that will do these checks for you and basically write this kind of error checking code for you, but we're not using those now. Again, though, because this is just protecting against programmer error, this is not something I write tests around. This is just being nice to the programmers who use this method in the future, who will probably be us. It's not really required code, which is why I don't put tests around it. Let's go ahead and refactor these variable names to match the content well, first let's make sure we haven't broken anything. We haven't. Now let's go ahead and do that refactoring. Call this content, call this default element. I have to call it default element because default is a keyword. And here we'll call this content hide class. All right, well, there's another time round the loop. Plenty of refactoring as usual. Again, you should be refactoring every time through your loop. What we've done this time is added the understanding of not hiding our default element, and we've updated our tabs library to take a different way of initializing. And as usual, we're refactoring this, continuing to refactor it as we narrow in on the right way that we want this to work. That sort of refactoring is definitely something you should be doing in your own work. Next time we'll go around the loop again. We've finished not hiding the active content div. I think next time maybe we'll look at marking tabs as active, which will cause us to bring tabs in as well. Your exercise for this time, well, just repeat what we've done so far. Add the ability to not hide the default content tab and update your method signature to use this options object. As usual, if you're doing the advanced exercises, go ahead and take the next step around the loop on your own. See what you can find out. And as always, keep your steps nice and small. That's it for this time. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.